Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I'm finally ready to do my full review on the Fox Knives Pelican. So I've had this knife a little over a week now, and I've made a point to put it in pocket a lot, both up in places like this on hikes. Right now we're next to one of my favorite, if not my favorite, waterfall in the San Gabriels. So yeah, I've had it in pocket a lot on hikes like this, and I've also had it in pocket just around the house, running errands as like an EDC type of knife. And I feel like I've had enough experiences with this, especially now that I've done a little bit of field testing with it. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it down below. But I have really put this knife through enough paces at this point to feel like I have a really good sense of what it's all about. This knife is designed, again, I'm probably going to butcher his name, by Kamaxram. I don't know how you say it. He's from France, I believe. Super nice guy. I've talked with him through DMs on Instagram quite a bit now. He's talked a lot about his design philosophy with this knife and kind of the intended use of it, and it lines up exactly with A, what I thought this knife was built for the second that I felt it, and B, what I kind of look for in a knife, especially lately. With how much time I'm spending outdoors, with the summer season coming in now, I'm carrying a lot of bigger knives than I would other times. And I'm really enjoying having a lot more knife in my pocket, in my folder. So this knife is designed to be used as a robust, hardcore outdoor folding knife. And that really, really shines through on it. I've talked a lot about this knife already in my first impressions and in that testing video, even a little bit in my unboxing. But I just kind of want to put it all into one spot right here, this being my full review, and express the things that I like the most about this knife, the couple of things that are not my favorite, if there's anything that I would change, all of that. So let's start real simple. Pocket clip. The pocket clip on this knife is money. I love this pocket clip. I really like wire clips in general, and this one is done excellent. It's fairly deep carry. A little bit does stick out of your pocket, but again, this is an outdoor beast of a knife. So having a little bit sticking out of my pocket on this type of knife doesn't bother me at all. That said, the clip is super comfortable. It's very round in every direction, even up here on these corners. So it doesn't snag on anything. It doesn't catch on stuff as you're walking on the trail. Everything just kind of glances right off of it. Meanwhile, it holds onto the pocket really well. The way it works with this G10 texture to go in and out of the pocket and stay in the pocket is just excellent. It's a great pocket clip. Next would be the handle. The handle is curved. It's got a contour on both sides, nice and rounded, and then it's also kind of chamfered on all of the edges. There's no sharp corners, and it's got this really, really great milled texture on it. When I put the knife right in front of the camera, I'll see if I can get the lighting right to show that off, but there's this like really nice milled grooves all over this handle. And instead of the like typical kind of cross pattern checkered G10, which is like a little bit sandpapery, this has awesome grip without being rough and gritty. It feels really well done, and I was not expecting that when I had just seen this knife in photos. So really like the finishing of the G10, and I love the way they've shaped it. On top of that, the ergos of this knife are, it's one of the best knives for its purpose ergonomically that I've ever had. Maybe just plain folding knife ergonomics, it's excellent. When I'm on this knife, the way the grooves are kind of built in like you would assume you're supposed to go onto it, it is incredibly comfortable. The pocket clip doesn't make a hot spot. I can feel it's there, but it's soft. Again, it's very well rounded. The curves of the handle, the way that it's contoured, just make it feel really smooth in my hand while still feeling locked in. And then on top of that, it's just the way that the back, I guess, swells, it fills my palm just right. And even though everything's really well rounded, I still have a great index on it. I know right where the edge is at all times, which is really, really nice. Sometimes if a handle gets too rounded, it's easy to be holding it kind of off cant and be thinking that your edge is right where you want it to be, and instead it's kind of over here or over here. So the fact that this indexes so well while being so rounded is a really good positive. And then one of my favorite things about this handle is the way that you can choke back on it. Because it's got this really great kind of swell back here and it curves downward with it, I can get 2 or 3, depending on how I want to, either way is comfortable, fingers right on here, hang the last 1 or 2 off, put my thumb right up on here, right kind of where this back spacer ends, and I've got this awesome index now to chop. And if you haven't seen the video of me testing how this knife does for chopping, it is incredible. Probably the best folder I've ever attempted chopping with. Not that I chop with all of my folders, in fact, I chop with hardly any holders, but with the designed intention of this knife being clear, I thought this was a perfect one to give it a shot with, and it was amazing at it. The angle that this gives, the weight of it, the feel for chopping through small to medium wood is just really, really good. I went through a tree that was thicker than my wrist and was pretty freshly dead. It wasn't like super dry, but it also wasn't like crazy green. It was like a decent hardwood little tree, and I chopped through it with ease. Like it was very easy. So those ergos on the handle are just awesome, whether you're on the grip kind of traditionally in a saber or a hammer grip, or if you're choked back, they're excellent. In reverse grip, it's very comfortable as well. If you do need to pry something with this knife, it's got a really great tip, which we'll get to, but if you need to pry something with this knife, it feels great for that as well. I suppose in like reverse draw, it's not very good, just because of that point kind of comes into your palm a little bit, at least for me, but that's not a grip I use very often. In forward grip draw cut, again, kind of the same thing. Because this handle is shaped so well to go into the palm, it's not great holding it backwards, but most people probably don't do all that much draw cutting, so it's doable. It's not like uncomfortable, but this handle's not neutral, so that's not the best for it. Action. The action on this knife is, I think, great for what it is. Is this a fidgety knife? No. But that being said, for riding on washers and being thumb studs only, deploying this knife is actually a lot more fun than I would have thought it would be. And the detent is really snappy, like really crisp. And for that reason, it just kind of flies out every time that I engage those thumb studs. It's not drop shutty. Again, it's on washers, and it's an outdoor knife. It's not, I think this knife is meant to have really tough tolerances and stay tight, and bearings wouldn't have been the right choice on a knife like this. Washers are certainly a better fit for this type of knife. And then, yeah, what else on action? I guess that's it. I can't really Spidey flick this knife. That's one thing I would like to be able to do, just because I love to Spidey flick knives. But the positioning of this thumb stud, how stiff that detent is, it just doesn't really work. And I'm typically able to Spidey flick a lot of things that other people, frankly, aren't a lot of the time, just because I do it so often and I fidget with my knives so much. I find that sometimes I'm able to Spidey flick knives that other people can't. So the fact that I can't on this one, it's a pretty strong, no, you can't Spidey flick it. Let's see what else. The blade, let's go to there. The blade on this one, I really, really like this blade. Before using it, having just seen this in pictures, seeing that it was kind of a like cleaver, sheep's foot, Warncliffe type of thing with this like kind of strange looking cut down through here where it comes back up a little bit before the tip. I thought it was an interesting design, and I liked it aesthetically. I didn't have anything against it, but I had no idea how functional this blade shape was going to be. Like, no idea. And it's crazy to me how well this blade shape really works. Being a sheep's foot, it puts my tip down here, right? Instead of up here like it would on a drop point or a clip point or reverse tanto, like pretty much any other blade shape, my tip would be higher, unless this was like a straight edge Warncliffe, right? But because the tip kind of has a little bit of belly leading up to it, it's still a really workable tip, I've found. Like for penetrating into material, actual like stabbing type tasks, it goes in as well, if not better, than any other sheep's foot I've ever used. It's a great sheep's foot tip that's still super usable, and Because this knife isn't like designed to be crazy thin behind the edge, it's not overly thick behind the edge, but it's not like a super slicey little EDC blade. Because it's got some thickness, it stays pretty thick to the tip. It's not a fragile tip at all. And I've jammed this into some pretty hard materials and have had no deformations, no issues, nothing like that. Speaking of the kind of curve here, the belly that you get here along the entire edge, I adore that. I don't like when knives have like too round of a belly, if that makes sense. It's just not my favorite way to like cut with a knife when it has that much belly. But a nice gradual curve the whole way along works super well for me because it's really good at slicing through material, whether it be hard material, soft material. I'm going through paper, cardboard, wood, whatever it is. I find like a great example would be going through extended amounts of like rope or paracord. Having a little bit of belly really helps me to glide through that material instead of catching on it, snagging on it, running out of blade, anything like that. It just slices well for me. So I like that amount of belly. I feel like it's just the right amount of curve where the whole thing is curved. There's not really any flat spot. It's not a recurve. It's just a nice, gradual, easy edge. The kind of cutout here where it dips down right past the thumb stud and comes back up, I did not think was going to be nearly as functional as it is. First of all, right in front of the thumb studs, we've got this nice kind of ramp where it comes up just a touch for the thumb studs themselves, and that's a great spot in saber grip. Now, if I want to choke up on the knife, it's super comfortable for me to put my thumb right up here, and because it dips down there instead of just staying flat, it's almost like for my thumb, it's just a perfect cutout. So the joint of my thumb goes right where that thing dips down, and then the pad of my thumb sits right on that flat, and I feel remarkably locked into this blade right here. Like the amount of control for fine cutting that gives me, it works incredibly well. Really, really like it. I don't know much of what else to say about the blade other than the one thing I would change about it. Now, the blade itself, the way it's ground, the shape of it, the finishing on it, the edge that came on it, and that it has held, frankly, is all amazing. I've only used this knife for about a week now, right? And I've done some pretty hard stuff with it, so I'm fairly impressed with this N690. It's done really well. I've had N690 that was softer than this, I'll say that. This N690 has done really well for everything I've done with it so far. But on a knife this kind of intense, this is arguably the best outdoor folder I've experienced yet. Like, purpose-built. I guess the only knife that I would say gives it a run for its money as an outdoor folder, and maybe I'll do a head-to-head on this because I'm just kind of thinking about it now as I'm saying this out loud. The Spyderco Shaman would be what I would say is most comparable in terms of capability to this knife in this environment. So that being said, this steel N690 I don't think is the best choice if I had my pick of any steel in the world. Is it a bad steel? Absolutely not. I really like N690 and I don't necessarily have any gripes with it. But if this knife, being as excellent as it is out here, had a different steel like Rex 45, like I have on my Shaman, if it had a steel like 3V, like I have on my Spyderco Tough or on my Benchmade Bailout, if it had a steel like 52-100 or let's think, even like 80 CRV2, there are other steels that I think would provide a little more toughness than this, and you'd still get at least as much edge retention out of. And so over the long haul, think more than a week, if I'm using this for a year, actively all the time, as much as I hike, if this is the one knife that's going in my pocket for this application, I'm gonna have to be putting edges on this N690 more often than I will those other steels, and I'm gonna find its limits sooner. Just inherently, the construction of this steel, it's more likely to have edge issues than something with a lot more toughness for the type of stuff that I'll do out here. So that being said, again, I like N690. it is in no way gonna stop me from carrying and using this knife out here. I don't have worries that this knife is gonna fail me, especially after the testing that I've done at this point. This knife is incredibly solid. The tolerance is tight, there's no blade play. The more that I've used it, I'll say this, it's gotten better and better, which is, I love that in a knife, especially a hard user knife like this. Sometimes you go out and you chop with a folding knife, which you can argue you shouldn't be chopping through wood with a folding knife. I would argue, why not? Especially if it's designed to be robust and outdoorsy and all that. Anyways, sometimes I have gone out and used a knife as hard as I've used this one, and then afterwards, upon inspecting it, I found that the tolerances just don't quite feel as tight as they were. Things are a little bit looser. Usually the knife is still totally functional, but you can kind of tell that it's had that kind of stuff done with it. This knife has gotten smoother. And yeah, I guess that would be the real thing. The action, compared to when this knife came out of the box, the more that I've beat on this knife, the more it feels dialed in and smooth and glassy, and it's like it needed to be broken in with hard use, not just playing with it, sitting on the couch, flicking it open and closing it. I do that a lot too, but having this knife out and beating on it made it feel a lot better, which is really good that this knife can not only take it, but it like wears it with a grin as I've really beat on it. I should also say too, I used a fire steel on this knife and threw some sparks with it just to make sure that it would. And I have virtually no deformation. It's like if I run my fingernail over it, I can just barely feel a little bit of grit right where I struck it. I think struck is a word, where I strikeified it. I can feel like just a littlest bit of, I wouldn't even call it chipping. It's like just a few, almost like little rolls where it went over that. So I'm really impressed. I've had other knives where when I've used the spine of the knife kind of on the corner there to strike a fire steel, I've had way more deformation than that, like on steels like D2 and stuff. So yeah, this knife is just, it's an animal. I really, really like it. One thing I said in my first impressions that I wasn't crazy about, that I'm just now remembering, that I'm still not frankly crazy about, but I've kind of forgotten, is the gap between these scales. There is just enough room if you've got like small-ish fingers. I guess I don't have that small of fingers and I can't really reach it that well, but like my pinky, I could get in there. You can just barely access the very end of the edge of the knife here, just past the sharpening choil. There's a little bit of sharpened edge that I can just barely get to with my finger. So if that's something that concerns you for some reason, then be aware of that. For me, I haven't had any functionality issues with it. I've had this knife in pocket. I've run my hand past it to get my wallet and all kinds of stuff. I haven't had any cuts accidentally or anything like that with this knife. It hasn't drawn any blood from me, period. So I shouldn't even just say it hasn't cut me accidentally. It's not like I purposely cut myself with this knife either. That would be a reason for concern. But yeah, I guess that's about it on the Fox Knives Pelican. This knife is just so much better than I was expecting it to be. And it came at just the right time too. Like if I had gotten this knife 6 months ago, when I wasn't hiking quite as much, and my focus on knives was a little more like EDC friendly, kind of lightweight, like cool kind of exotic fun materials and fidget factor and all that. I still love all those things, don't get me wrong, but I'm appreciating lately so much more knives like this that I can bring out here and use, and knives that do well with it. Because I could bring any folding knife out here and I could abuse it, but some knives just wouldn't take it like this one does. This one really takes it, and it's just really impressed me in using it. It's probably yeah, it's hard for me to say something is the best or the most or whatever, but it's probably the most effective kind of, if you wanted to source like a bushcraft folder of all the knives I've used for like bushcrafting type tasks that aren't fixed blades, this one, its abilities and its ergos and just the way that it actually works in application it's got to be the best for that kind of stuff. So I'll let that be that. Let me put this in front of the camera for just a moment so you can get a better view of it up close and personal. See if I can get the lighting right to kind of show you these grooves. I'm finding they're really hard to see on camera, but I'll just kind of show you the details. Bear in mind the blade is still a little bit dirty because I've been using this thing. I have been making a point to not overly like clean it off. I've been testing it. So yeah, I'll show it to you in front of the camera. You can take a look, and that'll be that. All right, so here we have the Fox Pelican. I think I finally got the lighting right to be showing you this groove pattern with that kind of glare there. I think that's working. It's finished so well. It's done that way on both sides. This clip is money. I really, really like this pocket clip a lot, especially the more that I have it in pocket. This knife is pretty big and pretty heavy. This is not a lightweight, slim, small EDC focus knife. It is built for out here. And its size and its dimensions show that. It's not trying to be lightweight or anything like that. So having a good pocket clip makes a ton of difference, because a knife this big and this heavy with a bad pocket clip is it becomes a real bummer to carry. But this knife goes in pocket really well. Like on long hikes, having it in my pocket the whole way, climbing over rough terrain and going over kind of intense stuff, it's really, really good. Here is the maker's name, or the designer's name, I should say. Kamaxram. I apologize, buddy. I don't know how you say that. I hope I'm not 100% butchering it. We've got N690, Maniago, Italy. This knife is made in Italy. N690 is a steel that's used a ton in Europe, so it makes sense. And yeah, the finish on this is really good. It does look like I've started to get just one tiniest little rust spot there, which I'm sure will buff out super easily. I put this knife away dirty in my pocket after chopping some pretty green, fresh, wet stuff, so that would explain that. Looks like I may have one or two more little spots there, but that's poor knife care on my point, or on my part. You can see right here, as I was explaining, where I struck the fire steel, just like a little bit, I guess you might call that like glinting. It's just barely deformed where I struck it, and I actually did it more than I did on camera. I tried it even more afterwards, so it's got a fair bit of strikes, a fair number of strikes on there, I should say. We've got the Fox logo there. The hardware on this guy is really nice. I believe that these body screws are T6s and the pivot is a T8, although I haven't put tools in it. I probably should have done that, but I've had no need to adjust or disassemble or do anything, frankly, to this knife. The clip screw looks to be a T8 to me as well. The pivot is just on one side where you put the tool in, which I like. I believe this one has a D shape internally so that it's not free spinning. I'm not positive, but I assume so. Yeah, clip screws mirrored, same thing on here. So you can reverse this. It's tip up on either side, but you can carry it right hand or left hand. And yeah, I mean, the construction on this guy is just awesome. I don't think there's really a way to show you, but the liners are skeletonized internally, so there are some pretty significant cutouts on the show side. There's a little one on the lock side as well. So it's not just pure thick steel in there. It is hollowed out just a little bit. We've got a G10 backspacer, which perfectly matches. It's the same G10 material as what goes on the handle scales. I think if you get the carbon fiber version of this knife too, it still comes with the orange backspacer, which is a cool touch in my opinion. If you wanted to dye these scales, this should be a color that would be fairly easy to dye. If you wanted to turn it red or brown, or I don't know, you can go anywhere from orange. That's not lighter, obviously. But yeah, this would be a good canvas for that. I really do just love the ergos and the feel of this knife. It's crazy to me how, not only how good it feels, but how well it works. Sometimes knives are really comfortable in hand, but then like the way they index and where they put the blade edge and all that, it doesn't make them like better at functioning. Although a comfortable knife is better at functioning than an uncomfortable knife most of the time. Yeah, anyways, I don't know if I'm making that much sense, but this one is crazy comfortable and it works super well, especially when you're working hard with it. Yeah, this is just, it is a fantastic folding knife. I really, really like it. I like the action. I like the ergos. I like the fit and finish. I like its abilities. I like the philosophy, and I like it aesthetically. Especially, it's funny, like the more I use a knife, I find myself either picking it apart aesthetically or like kind of praising it. Like a good example would be the Spyderco Spidey Chef. I think that knife is frankly pretty ugly in a lot of ways, but the more I've used that knife, the more I'm like, you know what, these looks make sense because it's for function, not for form. So I'm forgiving the form, and that makes me like the form. And it's like this weird game I play in my head. But this knife, I really liked the way it looked before I even had it. And now that I've used it and I've like felt the function of each of these, what I thought were just kind of like aesthetic design features, it makes me like them aesthetically even more, because it's like, not only does it look cool, but goodness, it works well. Yeah, I guess this is probably plenty of rambling about this knife. I would definitely consider this my full review. I've said quite a bit about it. I want to thank Fox again for sending me this knife. I really do appreciate it. I think it's just really cool of them to send this to me just to review. And they've also been really cool the whole way along at making sure that I had the ability to be totally honest about this knife. They were very clear with me that they wanted to hear both the good things I had to say about it and any criticisms or critiques. They wanted that that criticism so that they can improve and better themselves, and know what those of us who are getting these knives in our hands and using them would change about them. So I like that they're the type of company who's not afraid to hear those things. Yeah, it's really cool of them to have sent this to me. It's great that I've been able to talk to the designer of the knife and learn a little bit from him as well. He's somebody that I wasn't really aware of before having this knife. So it's always great to learn about new makers and designers, and I look forward to owning more pieces from Fox Knives. I've had one or two other knives from them, but I imagine after this experience being so good, I will probably own a few more. I really, really like the Pelican. So it's a great place to start. If you're looking for a robust outdoor focused folder, this is a phenomenal option. It's really, really great out here, and it just shines in this application. So there it is. That'll be my review on the Fox Knives Pelican.